All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We are here for a part two series with Mr. Earl Kemper. On our first part, we talked about how to sell a business in the next 5 years. Today, we're talking all about buying businesses. And the title of today's presentation is How Business Brokers Create Opportunities for Buyers. Earl, we had an incredible first discussion. We had a lot of views on that video on YouTube, and we're really happy to have you back here today. And I'm excited to hear what you're going to go through. I know you give a great presentation, so I'm going to pass the torch over to you. Give you the floor if you want to talk a little bit about yourself, high level, and then get into the presentation here. I think that'd be great.
Thank you so much, Tommy. So let me just share a little bit about my background to kind of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about today, Tommy. So I started out in the business, in business coaching, and we've had the pleasure of coaching a little over 1,800 businesses in about 40 years. And what we began to realize as we would do that is that they would maybe need an exit strategy, an opportunity where they could sell their business or merge or work with a son or a daughter with some type of a transition plan. And so we would charge a meager amount of money, maybe $15,000, $20,000, and help them sell their business. And so in the early 2000s, I interacted with a business broker, and he had made like $600,000 on a deal that I was getting paid about 20. So I thought maybe business brokerage would be a good idea for me to be involved in with clients. So in 2014, I got associated with a gentleman, I call him the godfather of business brokerage, Nick Guglielmo. Nick has been a broker for like 43 years. So in 2014, about 10 years ago, I got into business brokerage kind of full speed ahead. We still have our coaching business going, and we've done a number of transactions over the years in either the role of the listing broker or as a buyer broker. And so the first time we spent some time together, we talked about the idea of selling your business and selling it at the right time and selling it for the right amount of money and selling it to the right opportunity for you. And there's a lot of similarities in that, but we want to put the shoe on the other foot today and talk a bit about what's involved in the idea of buying. I need you to let me share my presentation, I guess.
There you go, Earl. Should have it now.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So one of the keys to any successful business transaction is understanding the business. I always feel like one of the things we do that sets us apart from a lot of our comrades or people in the industry, Tommy, is we think it's very important to understand the business. We think it's very important to understand the desire of a buyer of a business. And what we want to do is be a matchmaker, if you will. We want to match that perfect business with the buyer who is looking for the business. So one of the key components to all of that is, you've got to really think about what a business broker can do to help you in selling or buying businesses. So we have extensive networks. We have many, many brokers on a nationwide, actually global basis that have the connections to potential listings and sellers of businesses in all different kinds of industries. And what's interesting about that is we many times know about businesses that are for sale before they're publicly listed. So we have a heads up on the industry. We're always identifying opportunities. And if we're going to be that listing agent, we already have, in many cases, our list of potential buyers. So one of the things I tell people that might be watching this, if you want to be a buyer of businesses, connect with a broker like ourselves with the goal of identifying who you are looking for as a seller. What type of business do you want to buy? We have expertise in pricing businesses properly. And, as a buyer broker, our objective is to get you a business at the best price possible because we represent you. So we're going to look at everything from a standpoint of doing what we can to get the right business to you. And ideally, it is a mutually beneficial arrangement when a seller and a buyer do business together. So, we have a lot of sensitive information that comes across our table every day. We have to maintain confidentiality. Professional conduct and integrity is very important to the buyer and equally important to the seller. So what we recommend in terms of working with any type of a buy of a business is to work with a broker. We're going to understand market conditions, pricing trends, various industry-specific factors such as key performance indicators. And what we do a little bit differently, Tommy, is we're going to look at a business as to its readiness for purchase. So, some buyers can come in and operate a business. They can come in and be very good with the financial side of the business. And other buyers are going to be better just investing in the business and not really having to understand too much about the industry, too much about the opportunity in terms of what they have to do to be good at sales in the business. So some buyers are investors and some buyers are more operators. So we look at it and we say, what businesses are there that are highly managed, effectively managed, successfully managed businesses that can operate for an investment buyer? Because the investor is looking for an investment of dollars with a great ROI. And that's really what's most important to them. In addition to that, they're very focused on finding a future selling opportunity once they grow it. So another big opportunity for a buyer is, are you buying a business with tremendous growth potential? So we can get a list of, various databases that we have that we go through in various industries. We look at the revenue generated, the EBITDA. We look at the trends of the businesses. We look at the management of the businesses. And we help you as either a buyer investor or a business owner maybe that wants to expand your business industry by having additional locations, additional regions or areas in the US or globally. And so we have to keep up to date as business brokers in our organization. And Tommy, we have a little over 100 brokers in the US and probably 18 internationally. So we're all working to be up to date with industry specific news. Now, we have a lot of people in our organization that specialize in various areas of professions, industries, business to business or business to consumer relationships. And so, we have a good handle on what's going on in those industries. We have a good idea of what's going on in the economy and all the different factors that may impact values of businesses. So, what does it look like to really find the right buyer? Well, you have to align the buyer's goals with the seller. So we may do an assessment of the buyer's needs, their preferences, and their financial capabilities on the front end. We're going to filter our list of options to those businesses that match the buyer criteria. And then we're going to do a level of screening and pre-qualifying. Not every deal, even though it looks good, is good. So we got to really dig into some of the opportunities before we turn them into an introduction to our business owner buyers or our business investor buyers. And so we got to get clarity on the legitimacy of the financial statements and their operations and make sure that it is a good fit for our buyer. We also look at various interests and goals that the buyer has. What are they passionate about? What is their purpose and what they're wanting to accomplish in their personal goals versus their business goals? We always believe you have to align someone's personal goals with their business goals with business strategy, and then business strategy with the right business for that buyer. So we're going to look at location, industry, size, and growth potential in our search.
And
yes.
One thing I'd like to just chime in on that slide, if you don't mind just elaborating on this, because I always think this is so interesting because when you're looking at businesses to buy, like I love going on, Biz Buy Sell and these different sites and looking for businesses, but they don't give you a lot of information. I mean, most of the time you don't even know what the business is, really where it's located, because it's kind of like a pocket listing in real estate where, they only give you so much info. So what you're saying is, I mean, you guys actually have the resources to be able to reach out to somebody to find out what these deals are. You may be going on Biz Buy Sell going, man, this looks like a great deal, but you don't know virtually nothing about it. So when you're working with a business broker like yourself, you know more about these listings than anybody. It's almost like going on Zillow, but they don't tell you where the property is or give you any photos. They just tell you a little bit about it, right? I mean, can you talk to that a little bit? Because that's so unique to me in business brokerage.
Well, so here's the scoop. If you're staying in touch with your fellow business brokers in the industry, and they're staying in touch with you, then you have NDAs. You have a non-disclosure agreement between you and the business broker and that business broker in your information. So if I have a listing and I want to talk to a business broker, we probably already many times have an NDA, or vice versa. Now, on the other hand, if somebody is just looking at a Biz Buy Sell or one of the listing groups, by the way, there's like over 800 listing organizations. Most people aren't aware of how many possible places you could go for listings. But most of the time, the goal of a listing is to get somebody's attention and give them as little information as possible to get their attention, because the buyer does not want, the seller does not want too much information out there unless they have a serious potential buyer in the mix. And a broker doesn't want anybody to, even though they shouldn't, some people try to go around a broker because they can find that information out themselves in much detail. So, non-disclosure agreements are very, very important in the business that we're in. And the more strong relationships you have in the industry, You may have just a ongoing NDA with that company, and then it's just a very simple adjustment to add another business and learn all about it. You can make headway pretty quickly. So if I look at a biz buy sell or whatever it might be as a listing group, and I see a little bit of information within minutes, I probably can get a lot of information, Tommy, on that opportunity, where a business buyer is going to have to jump through a lot of hoops, such as, give us your financial information, give us some input as to how much you can invest, tell us all about yourself, your history, and all this. And so they got to jump through a lot of hoops, and a lot of the potential buyers don't want to do that themselves, so they overlook great opportunities. However, there are also on Biz Buy Sell and all the other listings a lot of situations where they say one thing in their information, maybe give you a little bit like revenue and free cash flow or whatever that they're giving you on that site. And then when you dig into it, it's just not the real numbers anyway. So that's why you also want to use a business broker, so you don't get caught buying something that isn't really of the value they say it is. Yep. So then, once we know that there's a good match, we've got a buyer who is interested in a particular industry or type of business, and we've got a seller that is appropriate and a good match for that buyer. Now we have to really start to think about all of the different aspects of structuring the deal. So, it isn't only about what the deal is as much as how you structure deals that make deals work. Some people have, their money to invest themselves. They can pay cash. And one question sometimes is, should they pay cash, or should they keep some of that cash and maybe have it ready to invest in the business, additional capital needed for the business once it gets started. So some people, they invest all their money. If you're not working with a broker, you might invest all your money in a business and have no money left over for capital. You might want to finance that business and use one of the best structures. Might be an SBA loan. Sometimes it might not be. It might be just a very simple transaction with a bank because you've got really good financial wherewithal to get a loan. Conventional loans are a good way to go in conjunction with SBA. Sometimes you're dealing with situations where the seller will be willing to do some financing for the buyer. Sometimes there's some other forms of financing. We work a lot at times with money brokers, and there's different options for money. And then you have to look at the business and recognize when you do buy it, what you're buying it in terms of the way you buy it, in terms of what the taxes might be upon the future sale of that business. Is there liabilities? Are we making sure that we have a good approach in terms of accounts receivable, accounts payable? Do we understand what the tax ramifications are? Do we need to consider doing some kind of a tax planning to reduce capital gains for future sales? And sometimes if we're working with the buyer and we talk to a seller and we have tax strategies, we can get the seller to come down on their price because they're going to be able to keep more money if they do some capital gains planning than if they are not doing any kind of planning. So if they can save money on taxes, maybe they'll sell their business for less to that buyer. Other things, though, related to any of that is, we want to structure the deal for success, because if for some reason that seller sells that business in a way in which the buyer buys it, but the seller didn't share everything they should have shared, and there's some challenges in the future that they did not know about, we want to be sure that we have safeguards around that buyer buying that business in the way we structure the deal. Sometimes there's earnouts in the buying of a business. So we may not be willing to pay for the business in its entirety right now. We're going to pay whatever we're willing to pay now, maybe 70% of it, and 30% there's going to be an earnout. So whatever the way we need to structure a deal that is to the benefit of the buyer if we represent the buyer, or the benefit of the seller if we represent the seller, are very key. Sometimes there are more than one broker involved in a deal, and you've got to negotiate and work out the best possible approach for all parties concerned. So when you recognize all those things and you make sure there are no liens, and by the way, there are also a lot of things to look at. There could be deals where there's not only a business involved, but also they're selling real estate with the business. So you have to be really well informed of what's going on there, or what's the situation on the property if they don't own it. We got to make sure the lease continues, and if you got a bunch of build outs in the space and so forth, and you didn't check all of the things you needed to check around whether a lease will be renewed, or how long you could set up a lease, or do we need to rewrite the current lease, or if it's a owner of the business who is willing to also sell their real estate, buying the real estate at a good price and tying it to the financing of the entire deal can also be done in various ways, and it's important to understand those options. So the more you understand about structuring deals, the more you understand about how to protect the buyer, know how to help the buyer get the best possible approach of their out-of-pocket to buy the business, and the best approach to buying it for future tax implications on when they sell it in the future. Those are all things to consider. And what we believe you should do is develop some type of a detailed timeline of the things you're going to do step by step by step as you help a buyer buy a business or businesses. And Tommy, sometimes we have people just come to us with money and say, I want to buy 5 businesses or 10 businesses in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. And so we may sit down and develop a 5-year plan of acquisition of businesses. What type of business are you looking to buy? Or what types of businesses are you looking to buy? Are they all in the same industry? And somebody may say, well, I'd like to own the business in this industry, but I'd also like to own suppliers to that business or ancillary services that I could also sell at the same time that I'm utilizing this business that is the primary business. So you may buy a business and then buy the suppliers and vendors and or competition. You may buy a business that enables you to position yourself to buy other businesses. So we want to drive the train. We want to drive the train, build the roadmap, create the blueprint, and follow it for a period of time for our multiple business buyers, but also on individual deals. We don't want them to just go stagnant. So let's get this done and then this done, and let's make sure that, if we need to have quality of earnings done, when are we doing that? We got to get our interaction going and collaborative relationship with attorneys and accountants. Sometimes there are financial advisors involved in the structure of the deal. Sometimes there are people that are part of the company that you've got to team up with, a CFO, to make sure that things are getting done on the seller side that need to be done so the buyer can finalize the deal. So working those things through on all aspects of the deal from the beginning of the relationship to the close of the deal is critical to success for the buyer that we represent.
And Earl, through that process too, obviously the buyer is going to be leaning on you a lot, and your team. Do you guys have, is it a scenario where, some buyers will want, a third party kind of CPA or CPA firm? Can you go through that a little bit too?
Yeah, so sometimes depending upon the size of the deal, they may want to hire some accounting or CPA firm to do quality of earnings, to go through a process of digging deep into the numbers to make sure that the numbers that are being represented by P&Ls and balance sheets and maybe other kinds of dashboards that the client has, or the seller has, better said, actually turn out to be what we think they are for purchasing the business for the right value. So they may state in their P&L and the various things they've done with maybe their tax returns, etc., an EBITDA number that is what the buyer is making the decision for the value. So maybe they have an EBIT of $1 million and they're thinking that they'll buy it for 6 times EBITDA. So they're planning to pay $6 million. Now the question is that EBITDA accurate? Right? I mean, if that EBITDA wasn't accurate, and let's just say it was off by $50,000, they're paying $300,000 more for it than they should. And maybe they will, maybe they won't, but they need to be at least educated and knowledgeable as to what the real value is. And so, if they put in an LOI for that business for 6 times EBITDA, that's a pretty solid statement. Now the question is, what is the real EBITDA in that business? So quality of earnings, and also, sometimes they'll bring in a team of people from their own company and sometimes outside sources to really dig into collections and billing and various other aspects of the business that could impact the value of that business. And assessing it with your own team. We also help them. We have a CFO, we have an accounting team. So we'll do some level of due diligence as well as part of our process.
And now, Earl, just to kind of use a case study here, and maybe we can this may not relate to everybody, but I think it'll relate to a lot of people that are on here. People that want to get into the game and start investing into businesses. Let's say, they're young entrepreneurs or whatever it is, and they have maybe two or three people that they want to partner together to go out and buy some businesses.
Yeah.
Would it be smart, from the research I've done, usually you want somebody in that mix to have like a good knowledge base of that sector of business. Is it smart to buy a business and leave somebody placed in that business to oversee it and then have some passive kind of partners involved? And we can use a case study here. Let's use a sector. So there's a lot of CPAs that are retiring right now, right?
Yeah.
And CPA firms, are probably something a lot of people are looking at right now of buying. What would be that process like if you wanted to get together with three people, go out there, start acquiring some CPA firms? Where do you start and how do you kind of go through those layers?
Well, that's an interesting one because having been previous in my previous life a financial advisor and owned a CPA firm, we actually did that. So I talked to the CPA firms at that point who I thought were the best fit for clients that potentially could be doing the financial advisory opportunities for us in our financial advisory firm. So clients with fairly significant either net worths or investable assets or things like that. And so after going through and identifying, I think went through about 8 CPA firms to get to one. And what I found is one of the CPAs was 40% owner, which for me was good because it's a minority interest, but 40% owner of this CPA firm and was looking to sell. Now, their structure of their deal was that they would pay that individual that they were buying out if all of the partners kept their shares and then bought out the 40%. It would just be a cash flow situation for that seller. And so the CPA, I just said, well, what if we were to buy that 40% interest and you wouldn't have to wait on your money? And it opened up a door for conversation to where a financial advisory service was then able to partner with a CPA firm to do a lot of business together. And I own both. So it was a win-win for me. So what you want to do there is you want to make sure that the other 3 partners of the CPA firm were capable of running the business without that CPA, who was really the person that was the managing partner of that firm. So can the other 3 carry the load without him in terms of running the company? And are there clients in the business that are actually clients that would go away if that particular individual goes away? Do we need to have a 6-month or a 1-year or a 2-year transition where that individual continues to work for the firm until the business is clearly stable with those clients and others have started working with them as their CPA? If there's certain kinds of skill sets and expertise that the individual that's selling has that needs to be replaced and it's not internal, do we have resources and connections that the other partners might have with someone we can bring into the firm? You just look at all the different angles, Tommy, when you're looking at buying something where some of the players will continue to be key partners or key players going forward. And if you're not of the skill set to really understand and know the industry well, you just got to make sure that you retain the individuals that have the skill sets, the management capability, or the client nurturing capability that would need to be there to keep the business running and making good money with you as a passive investor, or you with a primarily passive approach to your investing. So really depends on the industry, depends on the skill set, depends on the profession, depends on the willingness of a transition on the part of one of the players who's leaving, depends upon whether you have the structures in place to do the key elements of whatever the business is to be successful without you having to be a technician or a producer in the company, but rather just an investor. So here's my question always when I think about these things, and give me just a second here, I want to pull something else up.
And Earl, I did have another question for you, but I'm not going to hold you up here as you go back. So I'll wait for you to get done here.
Now, go ahead. It's all right.
Okay. So I did have a question because I know a lot of people ask us about this, when they're especially younger entrepreneurs that are looking to get out there and buy a business. They're already looking for businesses, but they're not in the position to really buy it yet. And I don't mean that financially. I just mean they haven't even started the process with like getting approved for an SBA loan or something. Can you go through that process? Do you start with the SBA process prior to finding the business, or do you find the business first and then go through the SBA process?
So the good thing about SBA is that we can do a pre-approval in many cases on businesses that are for sale. In other words, what are the qualifications necessary for someone to get an SBA loan to buy this specific business? So if we have a list of 20 sellers that might be a good fit for a buyer, and we have done our job properly, we may already have pre-qualified what that business needs as an investor or a buyer to any of those 20 listed businesses that are already pre-approved for SBA based on this criteria. So the buyer knows what they have to meet criteria-wise to be able to qualify. So then the next step is that the buyer, we go through the same process and ask that they go through and find out what they'll qualify for as an SBA loan based on, the business already being qualified as an SBA business for selling that business. And a buyer then just needs to be able to meet the same qualifications. So it's an easy connection if it's an SBA related transaction. So we've got the listing business pre-qualified, and we've got the potential buyer pre-qualified. So now we can do a letter of intent in such a way that we know we're heading in a good direction with both parties.
And now, Earl, that process does take a little while too. So if somebody on here is listening and they're going, oh, well, I want to go through that process, start the ball early, right? Pick a business that you think is suitable, talk to Earl, and then say, hey, let's go through the SBA process to see if I get approved for a business that costs this much money and has these different characteristics assigned to it. Is that kind of accurate, Earl?
Yeah, I mean, we have a little over 300 financing companies for various types of loans, SBA being one of them. Sometimes SBA is a good fit. Sometimes conventional is a good fit. Some other times other options are a good fit where there's some money lenders or whatever. It just depends on the buyer and their financial situation and what makes sense for what deals. But I think going through that process early on and working through a broker, if you really want to buy businesses, step one is know what you can buy financially. Pardon me. So one of the other real benefits in working with a broker is that a lot of the businesses that you have an opportunity to buy are not even listed yet. A lot of times a broker has their handful of businesses they've talked to in the last 2 or 3 weeks that they already know about. And if they know you're a buyer for a certain business and they're out in the marketplace talking to potential sellers, a lot of times the deal can get made before they're ever publicly listed at all. So you have no competition for the deal. That's really beautiful. If you can interact with a broker who already is working with some listers that are out there with their businesses, and they haven't yet made it public, but they're about to do so. And if I'm working with a client as a business broker, I've got a lot of broker friends that keep me in the loop when they have a business that they think would be good to sell, and they know us well enough that they're comfortable bringing those deals to us before they're ever listed.
And Earl, too, another thing that's really interesting to me is, especially with the whole millennial, kind of generation, and this isn't just to the millennial generation, it's just, I just get these questions a lot. This could just be anybody who's looking to step out on their own, right? And maybe create their own business. They're in an industry already and they're going, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to run my own business. It's always fascinating to me how many people may just do that, right? Without looking first at maybe at current businesses that are already operating, somebody's retiring or somebody's exiting. Have you been seeing that more and more? Have you been seeing more of an uptick in young entrepreneurs coming to you guys first and going, hey, before I step out on my own, let me see what's out there so I can step into the boots of an already operating business with a long track record?
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm always reminded of is we are at a point in time where over 65% of all businesses are going to change hands in the next about 5 years. Imagine that for a minute. That is an incredible amount of transitions that are going to take place. So getting ahead of the game to me is always the key in any interactions and negotiations that need to take place. And so talking to a broker to find out what it is that is available and beginning to think together about what is a good match is really critical to the process.
So, Earl, you almost have like the perfect storm, right? And this is just like the tip of the iceberg. It's like you have this undercurrent of a younger generation coming in and the wave, the tsunami of the baby boomers and the older generations kind of exiting here. This almost seems like just the tip of the iceberg for opportunity for, like you said, 65% of businesses are going to change hands. And that's in what, the next 10 years or so?
Next 5 years, 4.9 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah, if you think about that, the key components that are going to come out of that is you have a lot of options. That's the key I want to bring out there, Tommy. Is a buyer of businesses going forward has a lot of options. If you don't do things right with the options that you have, you're going to probably get burned. So you've got to mitigate the risks associated with deals by understanding all of the different aspects of that business that you can be involved in to protect yourself.
And you know what I think is fascinating too, and we'll kind of wrap this up here soon, Earl. And I know I appreciate you being on here with us. It's so fascinating to talk to you about this stuff.
Yeah.
Another thing too is it's always interesting to me through, and I know you work a lot of the transactions from all different angles. You know, you have buyers that are coming in to buy businesses. You know, the sellers that are exiting, you know, or sitting on the fence, the sellers that are sitting on the fence right now, and you're hearing Earl talk about this large buyer pool that's going to be entering the market, right? And then you have a large seller pool that's exiting. It's so fascinating to me how people think about the tax implications after the fact, right? Unless they're working with a group like yours, I've sat in on your calls before. You go through this with people, you make sure that they're thinking about this stuff ahead of time. But we get people that come to us and they, you know, sold a portion of their business to a private equity company or whatever, and it's December, you know, 23rd, and the sale happened December 23rd, and now they're trying to think about the taxes towards the end of the year. You know, that's just always so fascinating to me. I mean, I think a lot of people are sitting on the fence because they're not prepping ahead of time. They don't want to go through that process, but it doesn't have to be difficult, right? I mean, when you work with a group like you go through, you have a checklist of those questions that you go through.
Yeah, and you know, you got a business, let's say it's a $10 million business, and you do no tax planning, and it costs you, say, $3 million, right? And $3 million is the equivalent to, most people would say, a decent income, $150,000 a year for the rest of your life. $3 million produce about $150,000 for the rest of your life, and you give it to the government, right? Really? But it's not because they want to, it's because they don't know they have any other options, Tommy. And I think one of our roles is to help people understand their options. Our goal is to build wealth with our clients. So whether that be the seller who's selling their business needing to build wealth, or the buyer being able to buy businesses at the best value possible to build wealth. And imagine for a minute that same deal. It's a $10 million deal now, but they now find out that there's some planning they can do, and instead of netting 7 million, they could net 10. Maybe they'll sell it for 9.
I love that you just brought that up because that was where I was trying to drive the ship there. That's why I thought it was relevant, because that's kind of where it ties all together, right? The tax planning can actually help the buyer, you know, to potentially get a better deal too. I love that you landed the plane at that, Earl.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the buyer buys the business for less when there's tax planning. The seller is willing to think differently if there is tax planning. And they've got, you know, that much more income for the rest of their life if they do the sell with the right tax planning. But, you know, the short and the long is with a business broker, you're going to get deals you'll never get on your own. The short and the long is that when you're working with the business broker, the deals get done. When you're working with a business broker, they get done in ways that protect you, and it helps you to have options. Because as a buyer, if you buy the first thing that comes along, it probably isn't going to be the best opportunity for you. People are impatient to buy. They need to be patient to buy. They need someone to create for them the profile of who that buyer really is and match that buyer profile with the selling business that is perfect for that buyer. And keep all those things into consideration. not only that you're buying it at the right price now, but you're not at risk after buying it in the future. And that you maybe are setting the stage for future acquisitions. Many buyers of their first business are not done. So you want to structure your first deal as if you might want to do 4. You want to structure your first deal to where it is a financially stable, long-term investment. So it gives you the ability to do more investing in the future. And the more you structure deals properly and you work with experts in that arena of finding the right business, helping you buy it in the right way, and creating the environment for future acquisitions, that's what a buyer-broker relationship should do to help you build wealth.
Well, Earl, I really appreciate you being on here again. I mean, it just makes me want to do another another series with you. I get so pumped up about this, guys. If you've talked to me before, you guys know I'm so passionate about this. I think personally that the business buying, the being in the business of buying businesses is one of the biggest opportunities, if not the biggest opportunity that's sitting in front of all of us with the whole baby boomer demographic that's exiting. This is something I'm super passionate about, but you need somebody to help you drive the ship here. If you're just loosey-goosey looking on, these different biz buy sell websites, you're going to end up working with a business broker anyway. You need to have somebody in your corner. I'm a huge proponent of that. It's just like anything else that you're doing. So Earl, you and your team are incredible. I appreciate you guys so much. Guys, if you want to learn more about how you can buy a business, reach out to us, get in touch with Earl, go to Earl's website. Earl, why don't you drop how to get in touch with you before we let you off here?
Okay. So the way to get in touch is empoweredbusinessbrokers.com. And also, if you got something that can't wait, so to speak, feel free to text me at 785-414-0237.
That's perfect. Guys, thanks so much for being here today. We appreciate it. Earl, thank you. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Tommy.